Hello, and thank you for joining Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. My name is Ashley Burrell. I'm the Secretary of the Board for Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. We will be producing monthly podcasts featuring women of color in the peace and security field, so please visit WCAPS.org regularly for more details.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the WCAPS podcast. I am happy to be here with three of our new young ambassadors for the WCAPS program. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll have a very good discussion about some of the things that they do and some of the reasons why they're involved with the organization. My name is Bonnie Jenkins. I am the founder and executive director of WCAPS, and it's really my pleasure to do these podcasts with young women of color and mid-career women of color in the field to showcase the wonderful work that they're doing and the great insight that they have in the substantive areas in which they work. So I'd like to start our discussion by asking our three new young ambassadors to introduce themselves. I'd like Wardah to say a little bit about herself first, then Sylvia, and then Blessing. So Wardah, can you start?
Yes, thank you for having us. My name is Wardah Amir. I am a second-year graduate student at the Elliott School of International Affairs, where my major is security policy studies, and I'm specializing in weapons of mass destruction. My background was in chemical engineering, and I have landed into the area of chemical non-proliferation after doing internships with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and other think tanks, including the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, where I was recently a research intern with their project on nuclear issues.
Great.
Hi everyone, I am Sylvia Mishra. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for having me on this podcast. I am presently a Scoville Fellow with the Nuclear Threat Initiative, where I work on nuclear non-proliferation issues and also emerging technologies. My background is in international relations, and I got my first master's from the London School of Economics, and I also got my second master's from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, where I did my MA in non-proliferation and terrorism studies.
And Sylvia, could you say a little bit about what the Scoville Fellowship is?
Scoville Fellowship is a competitive fellowship which is awarded to graduates from either masters or undergraduates who have expressed an interest to work on international security issues. The Scoville Fellowship usually spans from 6 to 9 months, and it is extremely competitive, and one goes through a rigorous process of application and also interview by 25 board members of the Scoville.
Excellent. Okay, Blessing, please.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Blessing Ikpa, and I'm a recent master's graduate from American University School of International Service. And I'm currently working at the Department of Defense as a program analyst for the U.S. Army. And I work in their sexual harassment and assault response program. So I help to manage their program called Safe Helpline, which monitors a database of all different Army responders, so people who experience sexual assault or harassment within the Army can have different resources that they go to. So my job is managing those resources.
Great, thanks. And you all mentioned a little bit about your job, of course, and where you're working, but could you also say, each of you, a little bit more about your background and a little bit more about how you got interested in the field that you're in now?
So my background was, again, in chemical engineering. I'm Pakistani American. I am a Muslim American. I don't think I ever imagined myself coming into this field. But I think it was, for me, I always credit my mentors for introducing me to this area and me being able to apply my technical background in this area. And I also think it was me being a woman of color. It was me being a Muslim woman. It was me kind of living in a time where growing up, there was just so much stigma, I guess, associated to my community in a post 9/11 world, where inherently, I always wanted to pursue something which would kind of break me out of that kind of label and out of that stereotype that was associated with my community. And so I'm very happy to kind of have found myself in this area, knowing that I'm fighting on this side of the line. And I would really, really hope that pursuing this career just is kind of breaking that stereotype in some sort of way.
Great. Sylvia?
So I'm originally I come from India. I grew up in Calcutta, and I come from an academic family. My father is a professor of international relations, and when I was growing up, he had a strong influence on me. Our dinner table conversations mostly always involved my father explaining to my brother and myself about Plato's Philosopher King or Hobbes' social contracts. So my early foundations of Western political thought and political science were from drawing inspiration from him and his work. Eventually, I started working on international security issues and found the India-US civilian nuclear deal very interesting, especially because the two countries, after being on very different sides during the Cold War, eventually came together to pursue common strategic interests and goals. And therefore, I began my work on nuclear issues. But I am very passionate about expanding the role and position of women in nuclear issues in India. Nuclear issues and work on hard security issues still very much is the purview of men. However, and gradually it is changing, and I'm happy to be a person who is part of that change.
Excellent. Blessing?
So for me, I decided to get into the field whenever it kind of happened to study abroad program I did. So whenever I studied abroad in Italy, I was working with Oxfam while I was there, and it was in the height of the refugee crisis. So being able to be in that space and be able to do that kind of work really started to inspire me into this field that I didn't know much about. So then that's what led me to grad school. And then as I was in grad school, I became a lot more passionate about African affairs, just as me as a Nigerian American woman, and making sure that there's representation from actual African Americans and Africans in the foreign policy field, because I really started to notice how there weren't that many experts from Africa or African diaspora who were able to speak on these issues and on these topics. So that definitely led me into the field, and hopefully will continue to help me to build my career in terms of providing more representation and being able to have those discussions and be in those types of spaces of decision making in terms of Africa.
Great. And so I have 3 questions that I'd like each one of you to answer. And the first one is, what is your favorite aspect about your career and the early part of your career and what you're doing now? What would you say is your model of success? And you can define that as you like. And who are your role models? So Wardah, you want to start?
I think I'm sorry, can you just repeat like the first question again?
What is the questions are, what is your favorite aspect of what you do now, your career? And the second is, what is your model of success? What do you call success? And you, as I said, you can define it as you like. And who are your role models?
Okay. So my favorite aspect of my career at this moment, I think I'm so passionate about chemical weapons issues because chemical weapons are being used. And it is the only weapons of mass destruction category that is still being used in the world today. And I don't think it's talked about enough. And I don't think it's, I feel amongst all the categories, it's typically nuclear weapons that gets the most attention. Yet there are people in Syria who have been suffering. There are chemical weapons have not just been used in Syria, they've been used in Iraq, they've been used in Malaysia, they've been used in the United Kingdom. And so my favorite aspect of the career is actually working to preserve the norms that were established against the use of chemical weapons that are being violated. And there needs to be people who preserve the norm. And I think the passion comes from knowing that there's people on the ground who need us to do that work. I guess when it comes to success, what do I define as success? It would be basically working towards that outcome of making sure that these norms that are established are preserved. That would be success. I like to think of this not more as a professional career, but actually as work that people need to do for humanity. And I guess that's what's fulfilling to me is is preserving the norms and kind of looking after the ethics and moral implications of these weapons that they do have and seeing them for their humanitarian consequences. And I don't think that we should distinguish the humanitarian element of these weapons from all the other laws and policies that surround them. And if we're successful, we won't see another WMD being used. That's my definition of success. And as far as role models in the career, we I think need, growing up as a woman of color, there's been very few women of color that, you know, I can look up to in the field, and you are definitely one of them, Bonnie. But it's just, I think when I think of role models, there's not really somebody who looks like me who comes to mind that I could say, point out and be like, that's somebody who was working in the area, who was a Muslim woman who was doing it. So I do think that my role models would have been either older white men or, you know, people from different demographics and ethnicities that are not mine, who've done great amount of work to create these treaties and stuff. But I would like for future young women to be able to look up to women like yourself and people from all of our different backgrounds who are working in the area. And I hope that WCAPS is able to put forward these women for the younger generations to see as they grow up and continue to explore these little different areas and fields in international security and peace.
Great. Sylvia?
Great question. So I think that everyone can actually vouchsafe who are working in the field of security and WMD that it is a grim field, and then there are several news that really can make one feel very dejected and feel a lot of grimness about where the future of the world is headed. But one thing that really keeps me motivated, and I believe that is pretty much the favorite aspect of my job, is getting up every day and working towards making the world a safer place. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction and solace that even our generation, we have a cohort of young professionals who are working hard every day to make sure that awareness on some of these issues are flagged. For example, I'm part of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, which has a youth group, and members of the CTBTO youth group work towards raising awareness of the dangers of nuclear testing. So I believe that is one of my most favorite aspect of working in this field, where you are committed to making the world more secure and peaceful. Regarding my model of success, it would be hard to really define the metrics of success, but I do see myself in a position where probably in the long term, I would influence US policy making towards Southern Asia, which is China, India, and Pakistan, and also being able to influence policy making through a research work and analysis, essentially injecting language in policy documents, and my ability to do so through scholarship, I think would be my model of success. Regarding role models, I really do not have one specific person, because I feel influences and inspirations come every day in your daily life from people who you're working with, or who you know through social networks. So I have really learned and drawn inspiration from my mentors, Dr. William Potter, who is really committed to transforming the next generation of nuclear non-proliferation experts, or my mentor from back home in New Delhi, Raji Rajagopalan, who really has done tremendous work on defense and security issues, and have also given me a platform to work with her and understand some of these issues. I am very thankful to you, Bonnie, and I was telling several of my colleagues at NTI that how inspired I was in the last weekend when we did the WCAPS retreat, and it was really a pleasure getting to know you, see you in action. I think I'm deriving a lot of inspiration, and I've really followed your career graph and work, and it's really inspiring. So yes, I think it's an amalgamation of all different influences in my daily lives that I try to accrue and get inspired and work and do good work.
So I guess I'll go ahead and go. So for me, I think one of the biggest reasons I really like being in this field and also getting started in my career is simply the representation that I bring, especially with being at DOD. I don't really see a lot of women that look like me doing the work that I'm doing. So I think that just really inspires me in terms of being able to be in a space like that, knowing that there are people who are looking at me, knowing that they can also do that, even though I'm just starting off in my career and I don't even know where I'll end up, but just knowing that like I'm already making that change in terms of being in spaces and being in rooms where people don't look like me at all, but knowing that I'm still making a difference. And that also, I really like the fact of how I'm being entrusted with providing resources to victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the Army, just knowing that that's been sort of a touchy issue throughout the media, and that's been something that's been coming up more. So knowing that I'm able to play my part in making sure that people have resources and know where to go is very empowering, and that is very much in line with just my human rights background and just my passion overall in human rights. And then for my models of success, I don't think I have one necessarily. Kind of like what Sylvia said, I think just for me, I'm what success will look like to me is knowing that I'm inspiring other Black women and other women of color to be in this field and to come in to spaces and take up space. I think I didn't really learn that lesson and learn how that success could look like for me until I was in grad school, and knowing that there's so few of us already in this field. So I think that's what success would look like to me, knowing when I'm like in my career and making sure that I'm able to go back and help other women of color, whether they're from abroad or from my home states of Oklahoma and Texas. It's making sure women from like all over are able to at least get into this field, and knowing that I can be a resource to them, because I know there are so many different women that helped me to get into this position in terms of being able to have my master's and being able to like be in my first full-time job. And I feel the role models I have would probably be some of my professors from undergrad, specifically one professor, Dr. Earhart. She was my honors professor, and she really like pushed me to come to grad school. I remember I was simply doubting myself because I was like, there's no one that looks like me that's done this before, that's moved from Oklahoma to DC, that's been in foreign policy. Like, I don't even know any women of color that have done this. And she's really been my cheerleader and really pushed me. And I feel as though I definitely would not be in this position without her, and without even some of my friends. I view them as my role models, a lot of my Black women friends, because they are people who have shown me that like the different routes I can take in this field and all I can do, and that my passion for human rights and the work I want to do can like lead me far. And then I would also agree with Sylvia and say that, Bonnie, you've been such a help. I know for me, I've been struggling to find Black woman mentors and people I can look at and be like, oh my goodness, someone in this field I can look at and see what their career is like and talk with them. So I would definitely say you've been in that realm as well, in terms of being able to like help define what a career could look like in this field for me.
Thank you. But first of all, thank you all for such a kind word. And I just want to say that all of you are also inspirations for not only me, but also, you know, there's younger women and younger girls who can look up at you. So, you know, it's you know, you as you mature and you become more of an expert in the field, you know, you will find yourself you know, increasingly being a role model as well. So so it's great that all of you are in this field and dedicated to this work. So I'd like to move on to some other questions, and I think Blessing, we'll start with you. We'll go the other way around. Say a little bit, and all of you already touched on this. Say a little bit more about, you know, of being a woman of color in the field and some of the challenges you face and how you have overcome some of those challenges, and what do you think it means to have a diverse voice in the field that you're in? Why is it important that you're there at the table, that you're in the field, and that other people who are, you know, of color are working on these issues of that you work on, but also U.S. policy, foreign policy. Blessing, maybe you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I would say two major challenges I face is one, not being taken seriously. I experienced that a lot in grad school, in terms of there were just not many Black women in, like, because I studied peace and ethics, so there were like two of us in my program, and being able to like have classes with like, you know, white male students who just were studying security and national foreign policy and just did not take us seriously. I think that's been something that I struggled with, and I feel as though the way I was able to overcome that was really being able to assert myself and reminding myself and, you know, sometimes other people that I deserve to be in these classrooms. I deserve to take up space. What I am studying, peace, is very important. and it is on the other side of, you know, national security and foreign policy. So what I'm bringing to the table and learning as well alongside you is what's going to change the field, essentially. So I think being able to just be really assertive and be really proud of what I'm doing has really helped with that. I think another challenge I face is we discussed this a little bit last week too, but not being taken seriously in the field of like African relations, just, you know, African diaspora, anything having to do with Africa. I feel I've been discouraged from being in that area, being in that space, and going for that because I don't have the academics behind, you know, studying Africa or anything. I'm Nigerian. That's just who I am. I know so much about Nigeria, just Africa in general. I feel like I know more in terms of like, I'll say like street sense or something. I know more just about the culture and like everything else aside of that, but not having that academic backing and saying that I've taken classes in African studies or anything, I think has hindered me, and it's been really discouraging. And I don't think I've found the answer to that just yet. I'm still trying to sort through that, but that's been a huge challenge, knowing that I know what I'm talking about, and it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I've lived as an African American woman who's part of the diaspora, but being told that I won't be taken seriously because I don't know how to speak fluent French or I haven't lived there for X amount of years has been discouraging and frustrating, because I know that I know what I'm talking about, but I haven't been able to convince other people of that. And what was the second part of the question?
What does it mean to have a diverse voice at the table in the area that you work in?
I think, at least from like the DoD sense, it shows that women of color, Black women, the Black community cares about these issues. Not saying that I want to like make it into a monolith or that I'm the sole representation, but I think just being there shows that people from those communities care, and it affects our lives on a daily basis, whether it's domestic or international. So being able to be there and know what's happening can show that there needs to be more of us, and that we need to be able to be in these spaces and to continue to bring on more people who know everything from, you know, national security, foreign policy, peace, whatever that the niche is, that there just needs to be more of us in those spaces and being able to bring in our voices, because I think it does help to bring about change. And I know just in my position alone, I've been able to bring about a lot of change in the work I'm doing. So I think that has been able to help me in a sense, and help others who may come after me to know that like we care about this work, we can do a good job, we just need to be able to find our way in and be able to stay in as well.
Excellent. Sylvia?
I think the nuclear policy domain in itself is extremely small and niche, and being an Indian and a non-US national, being a woman and being a woman of color, the barriers for me have been extremely high for me to break into this small domain in DC. And I always say that the road from New Delhi to DC has not been easy, and it has been full of struggles and difficulties. But one of the core challenges that I face, and I continue to face, is essentially senior experts trying to box me into only studying Southern Asia. I understand that I come from South Asia and I have prior knowledge and background on some of South Asian issues, nuclear and defense and security issues, but I also have acquired degrees and have train myself to talk confidently and with substance, so I can talk about an entire range of nuclear and WMD policy issues and not necessarily only box myself to just South Asian issues. So the tendency of senior experts to only expect me to talk about the region just because of my ethnicity, I think is unfair. And that is one challenge which I continue to face, but it also disappoints me a lot. How I have overcome some of these challenges, well, I'm still working on them, but I think what has to an extent worked for me is I have been extremely hardworking, and whatever little I have achieved, I feel is fiercely mine due to my dint of hard work and being good at my craft. But I also have to say that along the way, I have found great mentors who have pushed me in the right direction. So I think it's also important to identify those mentors, because one always learns a lot from experiences of senior experts who probably have faced similar challenges while they were in their formative stages of the career. What a diverse voice at the table brings, well, I think we all know that diversity has amplified productivity and quality of work, but also I think the nuances that people from diverse backgrounds bring into bolstering the quality of work is essential, and that's why we should look at promoting more diverse voices, women of color, and also non-US nationals, because it really brings and infuses perspectives which are not predominant. And for issues, we should always have a 360 degree of understanding, and if we tend to shun ourselves from that understanding if we don't bring in more diversity.
Great.
Blessing and Sylvia both said some really great things that I'm just going to reiterate. I think the challenge is that we are underrepresented. And with underrepresentation sometimes comes this element where what you're bringing may be underestimated, and sometimes in a room you may be the underdog. But I feel there are challenges, and I completely agree with what Sylvia said, is that we should not be boxed into are assumed to be specialists in just the areas that we come from. So when I particularly chose to study chemical nonproliferation, I chose not to do a regional concentration through grad school because I believe this is an international issue. I also don't want to be assumed just a South Asian expert just because I have Pakistani heritage. And I do think I have the potential to understand the workings of the Chemical Weapons Convention around the world and not just for one particular region. And sometimes, like Sylvia said, there will be people who will see me and know that I'm originally from Pakistan and will assume that I am a South Asian expert, or that's kind of my area of expertise, or that's the area I'm studying, and might want to focus in that, want me to focus on that particular area when it comes to any kind of WMD non-proliferation related topic. And I don't think we should be limited like that. And I do think at the same time, while we shouldn't be limited to that, we should also, the backgrounds that we bring, the diverse backgrounds that we bring, the experiences that we bring are something that should also be appreciated. So there's two sides to this. It's not being boxed into where we're from, but it's also not being underappreciated. with the skills or experience or backgrounds that we have that may help contribute to better policy. And I think the reason why we need people of color at the table is because without them, these issues, number one, impact them. And if we don't acknowledge that, and if we don't acknowledge the experience or the perspective that people of color who are often impacted by these issues can bring, then you're depriving ourselves of a perspective that could help create better policy.
Thanks. I think those are all great points. And I do appreciate the different way of looking at the question from what Blessing was saying in terms of, being seen as not having that expertise, but not being valued for having the understanding of the culture, which really is very important. And also the other perspectives that you, Wardah, and Sylvia mentioned, which is, not being put in a box. So I think these are both important issues and things that people, it'd be great if people thought about as we work on this stuff. And, and being young women in the field, and a lot of these issues, you're tackling a lot of these issues now early on. I wonder what you would say to a young person, let's say a high school student, young woman of color in high school, or first year of college or something, who might be interested in these fields and asked you the question with some, what would you tell them about, what advice would you give them about how interesting this issue is and that you work on, and how interesting the fields of peace and security are, and what they should do looking forward to navigate and to be successful in this field. And we'll start with Blessing again and go around.
So what I would tell women who are in high school or I guess college, I would tell them to just keep going. I feel like for me, that was something that I struggled with because I had such high imposter syndrome, especially going into my master's. I was like, I cannot do this. I don't know anyone who looks like me. Like, I just feel like I am so out of my element. So I would really tell younger women to find mentors. They don't even have to be in the field just yet, because finding people who will at least push you towards the next step of just reaffirming you. Because I feel, at least for me, and then for other women of color, I know imposter syndrome is just so high, just believing that we don't deserve to be in spaces, we don't know what we're talking about, just all of these different elements. So I would definitely just say to just find mentors who will pour into you, and then just to keep going towards what you want, especially in the field of foreign policy. The field is so massive in terms of what you can do, how you can go about it, and then everyone just finds their little corner and just works from there. So that would be my biggest piece of advice that I would give. And there was a second part to it?
No, that was it. We can move on to thanks. We can move on to Wardah. Why don't you jump in here?
All right. I personally would, if there was a high school student who was interested in this area, I'd want them to find the power in their voice, and I'd want them to know that when they're walking into this area, they're going to be bringing something very unique to the area, because just like what each of us has faced here is we are underrepresented in our particular fields. So if a young woman of color was interested, she would be bringing a lot more to the table, because she'd be representing her entire demographic. But I'd want her to believe in the power of her voice, and I'd want her to keep going. And I think there's this resilience that's involved coming into it, and a lot of thick skin, and kind of just focusing on what that purpose or what you're trying to achieve in the area. And if you can just kind of focus on that goal. I guess all the other obstacles will be tackled one at a time, one step at a time. But I definitely would encourage young women of color to come into the area. And I think that that is how we're going to switch or add perspectives and add the value of new perspectives in these policy areas, is when we bring more people from different backgrounds into the area. And so I would want them to know the value in what they're going to bring, which is not just a professional career, but also a value of ideas and representing an entire perspective that's really underrepresented at the moment.
Thanks. Sylvia?
I actually want to echo what both Blessing and Wardah said. I think, Wardah, you put it really beautifully when you say have belief in the power of your voice. I think that is very telling, and it applies to all of us actually. But if I would have one word of advice, it would be also to focus on self-empowerment, and one could do that through essentially 3 Ps. One, passion, be extremely passionate about what you're doing and know why you're doing it, especially in the field of peace and security. Have patience, because it is a hard field and it is difficult to exist in the space. So there would be a lot of roadblocks and obstacles on your way. So have patience and don't lose heart. And 3 would be have perseverance. This field also requires long hours of sitting and working hard, doing your research and analysis. So perseverance is a very vital trait to have.
Great, thanks. So in the last few minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the organization. And first, I want to once again tell you how happy that I am that all 3 of you are joining as our young ambassadors for the program. And I know that we had a chance to talk last weekend. For those of you who are listening, we had our leadership retreat of the organization. And so we were happy to bring in, see our 3 new faces for the organization. And we talked a little bit about things that we hope to do. But I'd like to give maybe each one of you, if you wanted to, say a little bit about some of the things that you would like to see the organization do and how you think young women can be involved. And we had a conversation about setting up working groups for areas of interest for the members, and particularly for the young members, for them to get to know each other, to talk about issues of substance, to talk about, where they think, young women voices of color should be, and how that the voices can be integrated into discussions. So say a few words about that, and your thoughts about working groups. And I know we already discussed possibly having one on non-proliferation, and we can have one on other areas as well. But just say a little bit about some things that come to your mind on the issue of young women of color in the organization and what it can do. And maybe we'll start with you, Sylvia, and go to Blessing and then Wardah.
Right. So I think WCAPS is actually a great platform to unleash and give life to some of our ideas. And we have been dreaming of ideas, as we all know from our discussions last weekend. And thank you very much, Bonnie, for actually giving us the platform. And also, I know you have been so instrumental in always saying and encouraging us that, like the Youth Ambassadors Program, you young people should be able to drive it. So I'm really excited, one, about the working group, but also this platform also gives us the ability to collaborate with other young professionals, as in I know Wardah is doing excellent work. I know Laura is doing such great work at RAND and Blessing. So it's really an opportunity to essentially collaborate, share ideas, and also give life to some of these ideas. And that's something I'm really excited about, and looking to be an equal partner in driving some of these goals.
Great. Blessing?
So for me, I think, well, one, I would really enjoy doing a working group revolving around human rights. That's so broad, but I just love everything in terms of women, gender, African diaspora. So that's really where my heart lies and where my goal is. But I think in terms of my role in being in WCAPS, I'm really wanting to bring in other women of color just to the different resources that WCAPS has to offer. And I'm very excited to just provide women of color with this resource, because I feel as though when I was first starting out, this didn't exist just yet, but I feel as though it would be so great. This would be something that was so great for me when I was starting out, just knowing that different women will be able to use these resources in terms of networking or learning about different areas that they may not be involved in themselves, or job opportunities, and knowing that WCAPS will be at the forefront of making sure that women of color are being highlighted when positions are open at all these different institutions and organizations where women of color have had a harder time getting in, but knowing that WCAPS is here now to be like, there are these incredible women who study security or study peace or study whatever it may be, or have that knowledge, and being able to be that driver, I think is just really exciting. So I'm really just wanting to be on that forefront of making sure that women of color are banding together, knowing that these resources are out there, and that we are helping one another to build up our own careers, and also just build up this network that we can always lean on and go to whenever we need help, or want to offer help, or just want to be in community with one another.
Thanks. Wardah?
So I think what WCAPS is doing is finally we have an organization which young women of color can look at and actually see other women of color who are in the field. And that makes such a big difference, because it's a motivation factor for people to join, to come into the field. So WCAPS is kind of, will probably be a source of inspiration for people who want to enter the pipeline. I am really, really excited about that. I also think that what WCAPS is doing, it is identifying the existing expertise in the field, particularly people from different backgrounds. So when we're talking about creating a working group on non-proliferation, that's exciting, because currently I think we don't have a diverse area at all. It's difficult to find people of color, let alone women of color, in the area. And I guess if we create this working group, I see it being a source of kind of a pool where we can bring all this expertise that exists within the field. And in the future, in future panels and on future roundtables and future meetings and conferences, this will be a platform for organizations and think tanks and institutes to kind of look into and extract that expertise of a diverse background. And so that we don't just have we do have different perspectives at any table, any meeting, any policy discussion.
Great. Thank you. I mean, those are all great responses. And we're looking forward to working with you, not only on the general areas of work that we want to do that we talked about last weekend, but also on these working groups. And for those of you listening, we had a conversation of establishing the first working group, which will be looking at non-proliferation issues for all areas of weapons of mass destruction, so chemical, biological, nuclear, and we can even include radiological issues as well. So we'll be getting information on that, and looking forward to having Wardah and Sylvia leading that. And we also want to have other working groups. So there are a number of areas of peace and security that we're interested in, and the work Blessing is doing is also one area that we can have a focus on. So please let us know. You can send us an email, wcapsnet at wcaps.org. If you are interested in a working group, or just go to the website under contact and send us some information or request. But we are going to be establishing our first one, so we're looking forward to getting some information out about that as well. So I want to take the time to thank all of our interviewees, Wardah, Sylvia, and Blessing, not only for taking the time to do this on a Saturday morning of a long weekend, but also for agreeing to be part of the organization, WCAPS, and to be part of the Young Ambassadors. We are looking forward to doing a lot of interesting things this year. And so please stay in touch with WCAPS on what we're doing, and be sure to keep checking out the website, as well as Twitter and Instagram at WCAPSnet, and also on our Facebook page and LinkedIn. So we're on all the sources. So thanks again, all of you, for doing this. This is great. Looking forward to working with you. And have a great weekend, everyone. And stay tuned for future WCAPS events.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you for joining Women of Color, Advancing Peace and Security. Please visit wcaps.org. That's WCAPS.org.